They saw a ragged coat and dark skin, just another homeless black woman. Easy to ignore, easier to arrest. They dragged her into court, smirking, whispering, mocking. But when she rose to speak, the room went silent, because she wasn't who they thought. She was a federal prosecutor, with evidence, with names, with recordings, and she was about to burn their entire empire to the ground. They messed with the wrong woman. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if you love true stories of justice, hit that subscribe button now. The courtroom stank of dust and neglect. Old wooden benches lined the walls, worn smooth by thousands of bodies processed like cattle through a slaughterhouse. Buzzing fluorescent lights flickered overhead, barely louder than the bored voices calling names and reading charges. For everyone else, this was just another day. But not for Maya Wilson. Chains rattled against the floor as guards led her to the defense table. Cold metal cuffs bit into her raw wrists. Her tattered blue coat hung off her shoulders, stained with street dirt from weeks of sleeping rough. Beneath layers of grime, her eyes stayed down, avoiding the stares of those who'd already judged her. Bet she doesn't even know where she is, Officer Ethan Miller muttered to Sergeant Rick Donovan from the back of the room. Donovan leaned against the wall, his badge hanging from his belt like a weapon. Miller, younger and eager to impress, laughed and leaned closer. Looks like she crawled out of a sewer. Think they let her shower before this? Maya heard every word. They weren't whispering. They wanted her to hear. She's probably going to ask the judge for a sandwich instead of a lawyer. Donovan's laugh cut through the stale air. Maya kept her head down, fingers clutching her coat edges like they could keep her from falling apart. She said nothing. Not yet. The public defender, Jason Reed, slid into the seat beside her. His chair scraped loudly on the tile. He didn't look at her, just flipped open a thin folder, thumbing through papers he'd barely read. Trespassing, resisting arrest, he muttered without emotion. Standard stuff. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. He didn't ask what happened. Didn't ask if she was okay. Didn't care. Maya's hands trembled, but not from fear. From the weight of this moment crushing her chest like a stone. Judge Rebecca Parsons adjusted her glasses, flipping through papers. Her robe hung loose, her face empty of interest. She barely glanced up as she called Maya's name. Miss Wilson. Maya didn't respond. Her eyes stayed fixed on the cracked floor beneath her worn boots. Reed leaned in, voice barely above a sigh. Just say yes, Your Honor, and we'll move on. But Maya remained silent. You think she even remembers her name? Donovan called from the back. Miller snorted with laughter. Judge Parsons tapped her pen impatiently. Miss Wilson, do you understand the charges against you? Silence. Reed threw his hands up in frustration. Your Honor, I apologize. My client isn't exactly communicative. Parsons huffed, checking the clock. Let's keep this moving. There are real cases to handle today. The words hit Maya like a slap. Real cases. As if hers didn't matter. As if she didn't matter. The chain between her wrists rattled as her hands tightened around her coat fabric. The weight of her disguise, the dirt, the rags, the silence, suffocated her. But she knew exactly what she was doing. The real Maya Wilson. This wasn't her first courtroom. She'd stood at lecterns, faced judges, prosecuted cases that exposed racial injustice. She had used the law like a weapon for good. But now she sat shackled in the same system she'd spent years trying to fix. Mocked, belittled, invisible. Officer Miller stepped forward, emboldened by her silence. Look at her. Bet she'd trade those cuffs for a needle and a fix. Maya's fists clenched beneath the table, nails digging into her palms. Her pulse roared in her ears. The need to stand up, to shout, to unleash the truth burned beneath her skin. But she stayed seated, stayed silent. Because this courtroom wasn't just a place of judgment. It was a stage, and they were falling into her trap. The beginning. It began 4 years earlier on a hot summer night in Oakland, California. Her cousin Darius Wilson, a 22-year-old black man with big dreams, walked home after his warehouse shift. His only crime? Taking a shortcut down the wrong alley. A place where men like Sergeant Donovan and Officer Miller hunted for victims, not criminals. Darius never made it home. The official report read like all the others. Suspicious behavior, resisted questioning, physical restraint required. Another faceless entry in a system designed to hide brutality behind paperwork. But Maya knew better. She saw the hospital photos of Darius unconscious for 3 days. The bruises across his ribs, the gash above his eye, the fractured wrist. She heard her aunt sob over the phone. They said he fought back, and Maya had fought too. Already a rising star in the U.S. Attorney's Office, known for her work on civil rights cases, she brought everything she had. Filed requests for information, demanded body cam footage that malfunctioned, knocked on every door only to find rot behind each one. But no one let her in. No charges. No reprimands. No accountability. When Darius woke, he couldn't remember anything past the flashing lights. His spirit dimmed. Fear took root in his bones. Maya stood outside that hospital room, watching her family break beneath a truth they couldn't prove. Her legal power, her badge, her titles, they meant nothing here. The law became a wall she slammed into again and again. That helplessness, that fire never left her. The plan. Years passed, but the burn inside only grew hotter. She kept working civil rights cases, peeling back layers of police misconduct in courtrooms that treated her like an unwelcome guest. Then everything changed when an envelope slid under her office door. No return address. No signature. Just a single sheet of paper. A list of complaints, witness statements, body cam incidents. All connected to Donovan and Miller. Every name on that page bore the same scars as Darius. Black men and women brutalized and forgotten. Their voices crushed beneath the same system that failed her family. Her hands trembled as she held that paper. The names were more than evidence. They were echoes of Darius, of her aunt's tears, of every hollow verdict that let these men walk free. She took the list to the Department of Justice, pushed for an investigation. But the system wanted proof. They wanted footage. They wanted first-hand accounts. They wanted the kind of evidence that Donovan and Miller had learned to erase. Maya sat alone in her office that night, city lights flickering through her window, traffic humming below. Constant reminders of how much remained unseen. She thought of Darius, of the name she now carried like weights in her chest, and the helplessness began to shift. No more waiting, no more asking. If the system couldn't see the truth, she would make it impossible to look away. That's when the idea took form. Not a case built on distant reports or sanitized paperwork, but evidence from within. She wouldn't just collect evidence. She called the only person she trusted, Agent Marcus Brown, her longtime colleague at the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. His face went pale when she told him her plan. "You're not talking about surveillance," he said. "You're talking about going in cold. Alone." Maya's eyes didn't waver. "I know what they are, but I need to show what they do." Brown argued hard, but he knew her well enough to know when her mind was made up. Together they created Operation Blind Justice, approved only at the highest level, kept secret from local offices, from the courts, from anyone who might tip off Donovan or Miller. Maya took a leave of absence, cut contact with everyone but Brown, and disappeared. The transformation was meticulous. She let her hair knot into thick curls, dirted her skin with layers of dust and sweat, wore mismatched clothes from shelters and thrift shops. The ragged blue coat became her armor. The streets of Oakland, her new home. She spent weeks moving through shadows, sitting outside stores, panhandling near gas stations, sleeping under bridges. Watching, listening, learning. She felt public eyes slide past her like she didn't exist. Store owners waved her away without words. Drivers rolled up windows at red lights. Strangers crossed the street rather than meet her gaze. And the officers were worst of all. The way they stared through her. Muttered jokes as they passed. Barked commands without cause. It was one thing to study injustice from the safety of a courtroom. Another to live inside it. Every night on those streets carved another piece from her soul, but also sharpened her purpose. Then came the moment she'd been waiting for. Donovan and Miller working the late shift outside a downtown convenience store, laughing as they leaned against their patrol car. She positioned herself near the dumpsters, collecting cans, pretending to search for scraps. They spotted her like predators scenting blood. "Hey, what we got here?" Donovan called. "Another stray." Miller grinned, walking up without hesitation. "What's your name?" Maya didn't respond. She kept digging, playing the part they expected. Donovan stepped in, grabbed her arm rough, twisting it behind her back. "Loitering's a crime, sweetheart. Looks like you're going for a ride." She didn't resist, didn't speak. They cuffed her, shoved her into the back of the patrol car like garbage. "She'll be in and out," Donovan muttered to Miller. "Just another one for the books." But Maya Wilson wasn't just another one. As the metal cuffs bit into her wrists and the patrol car rolled toward the station, she knew the trap was set. The system that had silenced her cousin was about to hear her roar. The night of the arrest. The night Oakland swallowed Maya Wilson whole was hot and sticky. Humidity clung to skin like a second layer. The city pulsed in the distance, neon lights flickering, car horns bleeding through heat-soaked streets. But on the corner of 8th and Washington, outside a worn-out gas station that sheltered the forgotten, the world narrowed to a single focus. She sat slumped against the building, knees drawn to her chest, fingers picking at her frayed coat edge. Her eyes, though downcast beneath tangled hair, watched everything. She heard them before she saw them. Tires crunching on broken pavement. The casual beat of authority in the way they rolled through darkness. Headlights caught her like a rabbit in open field. Sergeant Rick Donovan and Officer Ethan Miller. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She kept her head down, let tension knot her shoulders. Everything she'd prepared for. The weeks on the street, the dirt under her nails, the hollow ache in her stomach, all led to this moment. The car door slammed. "Look what we got here." Donovan's voice cut through humid air, thick with amusement and something darker. "Midnight shopping spree?" Maya didn't move. "Not yet." Miller circled closer, flashlight beams stabbing through darkness, hitting her square in the face. He clicked his tongue. "You deaf? You know you can't hang around here." She mumbled something incoherent, just enough to sound broken. Donovan stepped forward, boots grinding gravel into earth. "Oh, she's going to play dumb, huh?" The flashlight dropped lower, tracing her frail outline, lingering on the thin blanket she clutched like armor. Miller laughed. "You know what, Sarge? Bet she's got a record. They always do." The words burned like acid in Maya's ears. "They always do." She felt the heat rising in her chest, the urge to lift her head and let fury pour out, to strip away the act and stand tall. But she couldn't. Not yet. Donovan grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet with force that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. "Stand up." She stumbled deliberately, let her knees buckle like someone too worn down to stand. Donovan didn't care. He twisted her arm behind her back, snapping cuffs into place. Cold metal bit into her wrists. Miller smirked. "What's the charge, Sarge?" Donovan shrugged like it was a joke. "Trespassing. Vagrancy. Pick one." The gas station lights flickered above them, casting long shadows across concrete as Maya stood cuffed, head down. Another statistic. Another case number. Another human reduced to a problem. I ought to hose you down before we toss you in the back, Donovan muttered, steering her toward the patrol car. Smells like a trash heap. Maya bit down hard, jaw tightening to suppress the roar inside. She felt her pulse pounding, the sting of humiliation biting deeper than the cuffs. Miller opened the door with a flourish. VIP seat tonight. Donovan shoved her into the back, metal cage closing her in like an animal. Doors slammed, locks clicked, engine rumbled back to life. As they drove toward the station, officers' laughter filled the car like smoke. Donovan glanced at Miller. "Remember the last one we picked up from this corner?" Miller snorted. "Yeah." Cried like a baby. Swore he'd never come back. Donovan grinned. "I doubt she's got enough in her to cry." Maya's fingernails dug into her palms, leaving crescents of rage in her skin. She wanted to scream, to shout her name, to tell them she was more than they could ever imagine. But she stayed silent, kept her head low. This was their game, and she was playing by their rules. Days in court. The courtroom felt colder the second day. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sterile glow across wooden benches and in different faces. This was where dignity came to die. Maya had known that before. But now, shackled at ankles, wrists bruised from iron cuffs, coat still damp from a night in holding, she felt it in her bones. They wanted her to feel it. The courtroom doors creaked open as Donovan and Miller swaggered in like they owned the place. Uniforms crisp, badges glinting beneath lights, smirks plastered across their faces like they'd already won. Maya kept her head low, hair falling across her face in tangled strands. She let them have this moment. Let them feel powerful. Miller leaned against the back wall. Chewing gum like the morning docket was his entertainment. Donovan folded his arms, scanning the room with a predator's ease. "Bet she's regretting whatever gutter she crawled out of now," Donovan muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Miller grinned. "She looks worse today. Think she even remembers her own name?" Maya's jaw clenched. She felt their laughter cutting through the courtroom like broken glass. Each chuckle, each sideways glance, another nail in the coffin of her humanity. Judge Parsons perched high on her bench like a queen bored of her kingdom, shuffling papers without looking up. Another day, another defendant, another black face she wouldn't bother to see. Reed slid into the seat beside Maya, tie hanging loose, eyes already scanning for his next case. He didn't glance at her, just flipped open the thin folder and sighed. "Same charges," he muttered without emotion. "Trespassing, resisting arrest. First offense. Should get you deferred judgment. Maybe community service." He didn't ask for her side. He didn't need to. The system had already written her story. "Miss Wilson," Judge Parsons said, voice dry, "you've refused to speak or accept counsel for the second day. Do you understand the charges against you?" Reed leaned in, frustrated. "Just say yes, Your Honor. Don't make this harder." Maya didn't move. Donovan chuckled from the back. "Maybe she don't speak English." Miller snapped his gum. "Might not even know where she is." Day 3, same courtroom, same routine. But this time, Donovan filmed her on his phone. Smirk stretched wide, he muttered to Miller. "Got to show the boys this one later. She looks even worse today." Maya sat shackled again, her body aching from 2 nights on the hard bench of the holding cell. Her silence had become their sport. "Just cooperate," Reed grumbled beside her. "Say the damn words." "Yes, Your Honor." That's all it takes. Maya turned slowly, met his eyes for the first time. For a split second, he paused. Something in her gaze, too sharp, too focused, too calm for someone beaten down by streets. But he shook it off, dismissed her like the court dismissed them all. Judge Parsons didn't bother asking this time. She flipped through the docket, impatient. Reset. Donovan's phone still hovered as Maya passed. She's going to be the highlight reel tonight. The courtroom laughed again. Another punchline in a joke they'd told their entire careers. But they didn't know the setup. They didn't know every laugh, every slur, every dismissal was being recorded, time-stamped, built into a case they couldn't erase. Maya wasn't just the defendant. She was the witness. The evidence in the storm about to break over their heads. The reveal. The courtroom felt different that morning. Maybe it was the heavy stillness in the air, like the walls were holding their breath. Maybe it was the way sunlight barely crept through narrow windows, casting slanted beams like spotlights. For Maya Wilson, shackled at ankles and wrists, it was the weight in her chest that told her. This was the day. She sat where she always did, head bowed, shoulders hunched beneath her tattered blue coat. Her face was partly hidden beneath tangled hair. But her eyes weren't watching the judge or the public defender. They were locked on the door, waiting. Donovan leaned back against the wall, arms folded across his chest like a king surveying his kingdom. His laughter echoed off marble walls as he nudged Miller, who stood scrolling through his phone. "Place feels colder without her smell," Donovan muttered, flashing a grin. Miller snorted. "Bet she hasn't eaten in days. Might not make it through another hearing." Maya heard every word. Let them roll over her like water, every syllable soaking into her resolve. She sat there, a perfect mirror of the system's assumptions, weak, beaten, invisible. Judge Parsons perched on her bench like this was any other day. She flipped through her docket, barely glancing down. "Miss Wilson, this is your fourth appearance. You've refused to speak every time. Do you understand the charges?" Reed sighed heavily beside her. "Miss Wilson, just say yes, Your Honor. It's the only way this ends." Maya didn't move. "You think she even knows where she is?" Donovan asked, voice low but sharp enough to carry. Miller smirked, chewing gum slowly. "Does it matter?" The laughter that followed was softer this time, but burned just as deep. Maya's hands curled beneath the table, nails biting into palms. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of holding back the storm inside her. She heard the clock tick once, twice, and then the door opened. Two men stepped into the courtroom. Their suits were clean sharp. No badges on belts, no guns at sides, but their presence was heavy enough to make the air shift. The federal agents moved with precision, not rushed but purposeful. Their shoes clicked softly against tile. The room stilled. Even Donovan's smirk faltered. "Who the hell are they?" Miller whispered. Judge Parsons blinked, peering over her glasses. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller agent stepped forward, carrying a thick leather folder. His voice was calm, deliberate. "Yes, Your Honor. We're here regarding the case of Miss Maya Wilson." Reed's head snapped up. Confusion flickered across his face. Parsons arched an eyebrow. "What's the Department of Justice doing in my courtroom for a trespassing charge?" The agent set the folder on the clerk's desk, opening it slowly. "Because this isn't a trespassing case, Your Honor. And the defendant," he turned, locking eyes with Maya, "isn't who you think she is." The silence cracked like thunder. Maya felt the chains on her wrists, the blood surging in her veins, the rage and humiliation of every day spent in this courtroom. And she stood. The shackles clinked faintly as she rose, straightening her back, lifting her head. The coat hung loosely from her shoulders, but her movements were steady, deliberate. She unclasped the seam near her chest, pulling aside the lining. From beneath the tattered fabric, the gold badge of the U.S. Department of Justice gleamed in the courtroom light. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Donovan's jaw slackened. Miller dropped his phone. "I am Assistant U.S. Attorney Maya Wilson," she said, voice cutting through silence like a blade, steady, undeniable. I've spent the last 2 months on the streets of Oakland documenting systemic abuse of power, racial profiling, and civil rights violations carried out by officers in this department, specifically by Sergeant Rick Donovan and Officer Ethan Miller. The courtroom froze, caught between disbelief and dread. The second agent stepped forward, placing another folder on the clerk's desk. Your Honor, we are submitting a motion to dismiss all charges against Special Attorney Wilson and entering into the record a formal federal investigation into the conduct of these officers. Donovan took a step forward, voice shaking. This is some kind of setup. She's lying. Maya turned to face him fully, eyes unflinching. You want to talk about lies, Sergeant Donovan? Should we start with the body cam footage you claimed malfunctioned? The night you broke my cousin's wrist? Or maybe the recordings from the last 3 days of every insult, every joke you made in this courtroom? Donovan's face drained of color. Miller stumbled back, bumping into the wall. Judge Parsons' gavel struck the bench. This is highly irregular. The lead agent stepped in. What's irregular is what's been allowed to happen here. Reporters began filing in, tipped off moments before. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered. Maya turned to the gallery, her gaze sharp, her voice louder now. This wasn't just about me. This was about every person who sat in this courtroom and wasn't seen. Every black man and woman mocked, silenced, brutalized behind a badge. Donovan lunged forward, but the second agent raised a hand. I wouldn't. 2 internal affairs officers entered, approaching Donovan and Miller. You can't do this, Donovan shouted, desperation dripping from every word. I'm a decorated officer. She tricked us. Maya took a step closer, voice low but fierce. I showed the world exactly who you are. I just gave you the space. The judge sat frozen, papers trembling in her hands. Maya lifted her coat, folding it neatly, laying it on the defense table like shedding the last remnants of her mask. But she left the badge displayed, glinting beneath courtroom lights. Donovan and Miller were cuffed. Maya Wilson stood free. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of their reckoning. The aftermath. The footage hit the airwaves before the courtroom door even stopped swinging behind Donovan and Miller. Unedited, raw, relentless. It showed Maya Wilson in chains, head bowed, dignity stripped while 2 white officers mocked her. It showed the smirks, the laughter, the slurs. It showed a judge who barely looked up, dismissing her as another nameless black woman to be processed and forgotten. And then the reveal, the badge, the reversal, the reckoning. Oakland exploded. Within hours, streets outside the courthouse filled with protesters, placards waved in humid air, some bearing slogans. Justice can't breathe, and we were never invisible. Others carrying names and faces long lost to the system's silence. Darius Wilson's photograph appeared among them, his smile frozen in time, a face erased from records but never from memory. Maya stood at her apartment window, watching the crowd swell below. Their chants rose in waves, rhythmic and fierce, reverberating off city buildings like thunder. But inside, she felt something different. Stillness. Wait, a hollowness she couldn't name. Her badge sat on the table, gleaming, heavier than it had ever felt before. Her wrists bore faint bruises from shackles. She traced them absently, feeling their phantom grip, the cold steel bite that reminded her she had lived it. Not as an attorney, not as an investigator, but as the silenced, the dehumanized, the unseen. Though Donovan and Miller had been paraded past cameras and cuffs, their downfall replayed on every news outlet. Maya felt no victory. The DOJ investigation launched within hours, swift and sweeping. The headline spun the story. Systemic failure uncovered. Federal probe exposes widespread misconduct. Donovan and Miller were only the beginning. As files were dragged into light, the web grew larger. Doctored body cam footage, missing reports, Complaints buried beneath bureaucracy. Names surfaced. Other officers, other judges, other enablers. But none of it felt like justice. Oakland's mayor stood at a press conference, red-faced, flanked by uneasy council members. Promises flowed like water from a broken faucet. Civilian oversight. Retraining. Community engagement. Maya watched him on television the same way she had watched officials years before, after Darius lay brutalized in a hospital bed. "I've heard it all before," she whispered to the empty room. Her phone buzzed. "Agent Brown. It's happening. The system's cracking." She stared at the message, words blurring beneath the weight in her chest. Was this what victory felt like? This ache? This exhaustion that reached into her bones? The city burned with outrage, but all Maya could feel was the echo of helplessness. The ghost of every moment she had sat shackled erased. She couldn't forget Donovan leaning in, breathing hate against her ear. Couldn't unhear Miller's sneer. Bet she doesn't even remember her name. Her name was everywhere now. Maya Wilson, Assistant U.S. Attorney, Civil Rights Division, the woman who brought the system to its knees. But they didn't know what it cost her. The real work begins. Oakland looked different in the sunlight. The same streets where protests burned hot at night now shimmered beneath day's glare. Quiet but pulsing beneath the surface. The West Precinct sat silent, windows boarded up, badges stripped from men who'd worn them like armor. But Maya Wilson knew the battle was far from over. She stood on courthouse steps, surrounded by reporter chatter, camera clicks, the weight of public expectation pressing down like summer humidity. The official DOJ report had been released at dawn. 56 pages, detailed and damning, documenting not just Donovan and Miller's actions, but the systemic rot that shielded them. Every case they touched was under review. Sentences re-examined. Lives they destroyed now had a chance to be rewritten. But justice, Maya realized, wasn't just about rewriting. It was about living with what had already been done. As microphones closed in, one reporter called out, "Miss Wilson, how does it feel to be the woman who took down the West Precinct?" Her jaw clenched. She didn't answer right away, because truth was, she didn't feel like she'd taken anything down. The system had cracked, but its weight still sat heavy on her chest. The scars left behind were deeper than any headline could hold. The mayor, standing to her left, polished and rehearsed, spoke into cameras. "Today is the start of real reform. A turning point for Oakland." The words tasted hollow. Maya knew the speech by heart. The same one delivered after Darius Wilson had nearly died. The same empty promises made when no cameras were rolling. Behind the reporter crowd stood families of those the system had crushed. Black mothers holding faded photographs. Fathers gripping protest signs with hands that once wiped away their children's tears. Faces that had known loss long before cameras came. Maya's eyes locked on Mrs. Thompson, whose son had been sentenced on Donovan's lies. Tears traced her weathered cheeks, but in her gaze burned something fierce. Hope, maybe, or defiance. Maya stepped away from microphones, walking toward the families instead. The cameras followed, but she didn't care. She stopped in front of Mrs. Thompson, voice steady. "I can't give you back what they took from you, but I can stand with you now." Mrs. Thompson gripped her hand. That's more than anyone's ever done. For the first time that day, Maya felt the shift inside her. The space where helplessness had lived now filled with something stronger. The fight wasn't hers alone. It never had been. Later that evening, Maya stood in a packed community center. Walls that once echoed with anger now vibrated with something new. Action. The council hearing buzzed with tension. Some were wary, bruised by shock waves Maya's operation had sent through their lives. Others were hopeful, hungry for change. Lisa Rivera, a local organizer who had once called Maya reckless for going undercover without community consent, stood at the front, arms crossed, voice sharp as she addressed the crowd. This isn't about fixing broken policies. It's about changing who holds the power. Maya listened, hands clasped tight in her lap, feeling the weight of those words. She had stepped into this fight as an investigator, thinking she could expose truth and let the system fix itself. But systems don't fix themselves. When Lisa turned to her, the challenge in her voice softened into invitation. You help crack the walls, but will you stand here with us when we rebuild? Maya stood, feeling the room's eyes settle on her. For the first time, not as a symbol, but as a person. I'm here, she said, voice unwavering. Not just to testify, but to build something that won't crumble when no one's looking. The crowd didn't erupt in applause. This wasn't a victory lap. This was the hard part, where real work began. Outside the community center, the city skyline stretched against darkening sky. Streets were quieter now, but Maya knew fire still burned beneath. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Agent Brown. You've started something they can't put back in the box. She stared at the words, their weight sinking in. Legacy wasn't about headlines or DOJ reports. It was about every voice that refused to be silenced after hers. As Maya walked through Oakland streets that night, her badge tucked away, her footsteps echoed with something new. The system had cracked. And though the collapse was messy, painful, unfinished, it was open now. And justice, she knew, lived in that open space. This story reminds us that justice is not given. It's fought for, often at great personal cost. Maya Wilson's journey shows that true change needs courage, sacrifice, and standing firm even when the system tries to break you. For everyone watching who has witnessed struggle, remember, the fight for dignity continues. Use your voice and your experience to ensure injustice never goes unchallenged. Because silence lets oppression win. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, give it a like and leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. See you next time.